I was taken unconscious to the hospital at age 12 by an undisclosed illness. To this day, I don't know what it was. I did confirm with the doctor, whom I met many years later at my sister's wedding, that I was near death. He said he never thought I knew this. I woke in the hospital in a private room and found I was in a corner of the ceiling looking down on myself in bed and to a nurse who was wearing a short-sleeved uniform. She was attempting to adjust my fore and bungled it as I have very difficult veins. She kept trying and finally took the line out and somehow or other accidentally got the needle stuck in her own upper arm. Meanwhile, I found myself hovering there watching until I found that I had been joined by an older, thin man. He stood behind a podium and seemed to be making notes in a ledger. I could make out none of his thoughts whatsoever unless he chose me to hear, otherwise he was a complete enigma to me, yet I knew that he could read all of my thoughts. It was like he had plugged into me. In this same way, he fed some things into my mind that astounded me, especially since I had little religious upbringing and had only recently been baptized into a branch of the Christian Church. He let me know that our experience on earth is but a flash, though it seems very long while we are living it, and that it's a means to evolve. He also communicated that tragedy itself is overly stressed here and is only a kind of vessel for evolving. Then he asked me, "Do you have any choice?" He didn't say what this choice was, but I knew he was asking if I wanted to live or die. I hung there so full of joy and peace that at that moment I didn't care at all, because he had just explained that time was nothing. So I knew in the blink of a spiritual eye that I would be joining him and others in another world, so what did it matter where I went? But I did just think that I would have thought I'd be worried about my mother and father's grief. Still, from this new understanding, I wasn't worried about them at all. Because it was just that blink of an eye. Still, that seemed to be enough. A split second later, I woke up in my body and the nurse was there. Only now, she was wearing a long-sleeved uniform, so either she had somehow changed her clothes or it was another day. I told her what happened and she said I was hallucinating, that I had been unconscious for 2 days. I told her about the 4, and asked if that really happened. She looked at me for a few seconds, then rolled up her sleeve and I saw the small band-aid where the needle had pricked her. But she said I must have opened my eyes for a few seconds and seen it and she just hadn't noticed. The way she treated me told me there was something to be ashamed of in this kind of talking, and I never mentioned this again for many years. I must say the people I've told since then don't seem convinced either. I felt sorry, even cheated, about not seeing a bright light or going through a tunnel and felt like I'd had a second-class experience. When I heard, many years later, that lots of other people had also had out-of-body experiences and that they had all these adventures that I hadn't had. Because when it happened to me, I'd never heard of such a thing. Interestingly, I did pick up one thing very recently in reading about OBEs. I read that very often people who leave their bodies often have trouble wearing a wristwatch after that. This caused me to have cold chills, because it was exactly at this time that I began stopping wristwatches. My father accused me of being careless, banging my wrist against surfaces or forgetting and wearing my watch into the shower. But I was being extremely careful because I was breaking all my watches and had no idea how it could happen. While my father finally said that I could have only the very cheapest watches now, but those wouldn't run on me either. It was about 50 years later when my new husband was driving me to the airport and noticed I wasn't wearing a watch. I told him that though I now several that I had bought over the years, still trying, that none of them worked anymore. He said I couldn't fly off without a watch, pulled into a lot of the drugstore and went inside and bought me a watch for about $12 that hung loose on my wrist like a bracelet. It worked and still works like a charm. I read that the magnetic disruption of being out of body usually wears off after many years, so maybe I can get a good watch now. But it wouldn't be worth it, as I seldom remember to wear this one after a lifetime of not wearing wristwatches. After all this time, and a very difficult life, I can't count the times that I wished I had taken a different option when the Spirit asked me if I had any choice. But now with my grown son and a wonderful husband and a writing career, I'm glad I chose as I did.